Hey there. Thanks for watching another episode of my YouTube video channel. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit with you. I wanted to talk about Olympus 35 RD camera with you today. So around the end of 60s and beginning of 70s, there was kind of a series of these various rangefinders that became fairly popular out and about. And there was, I want to say, three key companies that were making these, and then a lot of other copies everybody else tried to make them once they saw they were very successful. So Olympus was definitely one of them. Then Canon also made a range, and then there's some Minoltas as well that are out there, Konicas and some other ones. So I had a Olympus 35 RC and I also shot an Olympus 35 SB before, so this is my third installment of that entire series. This was the last of the cameras that came out in that series in the 70s. And so I gotta say, in my opinion, this is my favorite so far. It has some interesting features that you wouldn't find on a 35 RC, which is kind of very popular. So let's kind of do a little bit of a review and walk around the camera, and I'll tell you some of the things that might be of interest. So I'm kind of going to start on the left side and work my way to the right side, and then we're going to look at top and the bottom and the back of the camera, talk a little bit about the battery. So, all right, so basically it's a rangefinder. That's the first thing to understand. So what does this mean if you're not familiar with rangefinders? That actually means that you look through an optical system that lets you see the scene, and it also overlaps a little patch that is usually a different color. And that patch basically, for lack of a better word, feeds light from this particular side, and then once you are moving the lens, there's a little pin that moves inside and moves a little mirror inside the rangefinder system, or a set of optics, if you will, and then the little patch moves, and when the patch is aligned, that means that you are in focus. So you're not looking through the lens. If you're not familiar with the rangefinders, I think that's a fair thing to point out, because if you were to, for instance, have a cap on this camera and you forgot to take the cap off, you would be seeing something through the viewfinder, but you would actually never end up taking a picture. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So moving on from left to the right, let's talk about the lens. This is a very, very good Zuiko 1.7 f40 millimeter. I think it's a 6-element lens. All that really means is that it has a lot of corrections to make very sharp image, and then it's a coated lens, which means that it has the capability of resisting flare. So it's a very nice lens, like I said. I'll show you some shots taken with this. They're very sharp. Everybody loves these cameras, both Canon as well as Olympus, because these lenses are very sharp. So then what you have on top here is a shutter speed selector. And this camera is basically in auto mode a shutter priority camera. That means that when you set the shutter, you will actually keep the shutter at that speed, and the camera will automatically pick the right aperture. It's not maybe as great as having aperture priority, but it's not that bad. So let's say that you have f1 like the EI 100 film or in the camera, and if you're out and about in normal weather, you'd probably just set it on 1/25th of a second, and you're probably going to end up with f8, f18, f11, f16 kind of shots with it. So yeah, if you want to get less depth of field and you still have your same 100 film in, you can actually, for instance, move the shutter speed to 500, and then what's going to happen is, because the shutter speed is fast, there's going to be widening of the aperture to bring in that light, so you might end up shooting at f4 or whatever. If you don't have a lot of light, the camera is going to have a tendency to go to 1.7, f2, f2.8 or whatever anyway, so you're going to get a shallow depth of field. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And then talking about the lens, so you have 3 rings on here. You have the shutter ring, you have the focus ring, which doesn't actually move the lens that much, which is a great thing because it's easy to focus then. And then you have a aperture ring selector. So you can just move the aperture ring to any particular aperture, and if you do that, you're gonna take the camera into the manual mode. So like right now I'm at f4 and 500th of a second, and that's basically what the camera is going to take a picture at. if you put it into the A, then you're basically telling the camera that you want to keep the shutter at whatever you selected, but you want the camera to pick the proper aperture to go along with that, which it will do if it has the battery in. Alright, so moving on from that, you have the self-timer here. I'm not going to use it now, but basically you just pull down, press the button, and then it comes up. When it's done coming up, it will actually fire the camera. You have to have the camera cocked and ready to go before you do that, obviously, so the shutter is ready to fire. Alright, the shutter button is just a little plastic deal here. It does have a screwing for the remote release, so that's always nice. I probably will never use it for something like that, just because this is more of a walk-around street camera to me than something I want to use in a tripod. And then you have just a winder here that basically kind of tucks in when you're not using it, so it's flush with the side. And it's not kind of in your way as you're putting it close to your face. So yeah, I think that's pretty much going from left to right, then going from the top. The only thing we haven't talked about is a hot shoe here. I have like a little Olympus modern manual flash that I put on here, and so what you have to do there, and I'm not going to get into it too deeply here, is you have to set the guide number, and then you have to set the camera to flash mode, and then it's going to try to synchronize to that. Also, looking at the bottom now, I want to also point out here that you have to set your ISO speed of your film in order for the metering to work correctly. And there's a little lever here that lets you do that, and basically goes from ASA 25 to 800. That's not a huge range, but it's good enough for most situations, I think. Obviously, you can shoot in manual mode if you needed to go outside of that range. So the other thing worth mentioning on the bottom of the camera is, obviously it does take a battery. You can use the camera in manual without the battery, but if you want to use it with the automatic metering, then you have to put the battery in. The batteries that these use are the old Mercury style PX625 batteries that you're not going to find anymore. However, there are some alternatives out there. The one that I would recommend, and I just recently bought, and I don't have it here to show you, but it's basically like a little brass adapter that you put like a SR44 cell in there, and then turn it upside down and put it in here, and that brass adapter makes all the connections work like they should, so you end up being able to use a modern silver oxide battery to go in instead of your PX625 that's no longer available. So that's kind of another nice thing, I think. If you don't want that, there's also a company, I don't know how you pronounce it, Wayne-Cell, that makes PX625 replacement batteries. They're kind of like $8, $9, $10, but honestly worth the price, because this meter uses very little battery. So you buy one of these batteries, and I think it'll last you a year if you're not shooting with it a lot. So that at least has been my experience. Last thing we're going to do is look in the back of the camera. Again, one of the nicer things about about this one is, one of the things that used to drive me nuts about the Olympus 35RC is it only had one of these sprocket drives on one side, so like sometimes the film wouldn't advance like it should, but here you have your traditional two, and I think when I pull the film with this, it just works a lot better than the RC does. Yeah, these are not that inexpensive. I say one of these will run almost around $200. I've even seen them for $300. I found one locally for $100, so I thought it was a good deal. Actually, I thought about selling it, but once I started using it, I was just like, no, I gotta keep this one. So yeah, I do like this camera a lot, and I think if you're looking for something like this, or if you're looking for an alternative to Canon GL, or QL17 G3, which is very popular, this is very, very similar to it, and it's going to give you the same image quality for sure. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.